The chandeliers cast a warm glow across Le Jardin, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath the light, and the gentle hum of conversation mixed with the soft clink of silverware against fine china. This wasn't just any restaurant, it was where the elite came to see and be seen. Among the well-heeled diners sat Vanessa Sterling, America's first black female billionaire. Her empire, Sterling Beauty Enterprises, had revolutionized the cosmetics industry. Tonight, she commanded attention in a tailored Valentino suit, her neck adorned with diamonds that caught every ray of light. Her presence alone made heads turn. At a corner table, she sat with two other women, fellow board members of her company. Their laughter carried across the room, punctuated by the occasional clink of their champagne glasses. To them, this was just another Tuesday evening at New York's finest establishment. Across the dining room, Jasmine Thompson moved between tables with practiced grace. Her uniform was pressed perfectly, her hair pulled back neatly, but exhaustion lined her young face. She had been working double shifts for weeks, trying to save enough money for her mother's medical bills. At 23, she carried the weight of responsibility far beyond her years. The evening seemed ordinary enough until Jasmine approached Vanessa's table to take their order. As she pulled out her notepad, her hand trembled slightly. She had heard stories about Vanessa Sterling's exacting standards. "Good evening, ladies. Welcome to Le Jardin. May I start you off with any appetizers?" Jasmine's voice was steady, professional, despite her nerves. Vanessa barely glanced up from her menu, her voice sharp as cut glass. "I would hope you'd know better than to interrupt when we're clearly in the middle of a conversation." The two women with her exchanged knowing looks. One of them, dressed in a red designer dress, smirked behind her menu. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll come back," Jasmine began, but Vanessa cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Since you're already here, we'll have the truffle fondue to start, and make sure it's properly heated this time." The last server couldn't seem to manage even that simple task. What happened next would shake the foundations of Vanessa's carefully curated world, though she didn't know it yet. In the far corner of the restaurant, a man in an expensive but understated suit sat alone, his phone discreetly positioned on the table. His name was Marcus Bennett, and he wasn't just any diner. He was one of the most influential documentary filmmakers in the country. His latest project? A series about wealth, power, and their impact on human dignity. And tonight, Vanessa Sterling was unknowingly providing him with exactly the footage he needed. But the evening was far from over, and what would unfold in the next hour would become more than just footage for a documentary. It would become a viral moment that would force America to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the way we treat each other. The truffle fondue arrived at Vanessa's table, steam rising elegantly from the ceramic pot. Jasmine set it down carefully, making sure everything was perfectly positioned. "Here you are, ladies. Can I get you anything else?" Vanessa dipped a piece of bread into the fondue and frowned. "This isn't hot enough," she declared, her voice carrying across the room. "And the consistency is all wrong. Do you even know what proper fondue should look like?" Jasmine's cheeks burned, but she maintained her composure. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll have the kitchen prepare a fresh one right away." "Don't bother," Vanessa sneered. "I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand the standards of fine dining. Where did they find you anyway? The local diner?" The woman in red laughed, adding fuel to the fire. "Honestly, Vanessa, the service here has gone downhill. They'll hire anyone these days." Marcus Bennett's finger moved slightly on his phone, adjusting the angle. The screen captured every word, every gesture, every microaggression playing out before him. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes missed nothing. Jasmine stood there, trapped between professionalism and dignity. Her hands clutched her notepad so tightly her knuckles turned white. Before she could respond, Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let me explain something to you, since clearly no one else has bothered. When you work in an establishment like this, you're expected to maintain certain standards. But I suppose that's too much to ask from someone who probably couldn't even afford to eat here. The restaurant had grown quieter, other diners uncomfortable witnesses to the scene unfolding before them. Some looked away, others watched with a mix of disgust and fascination. Through it all, Marcus's phone continued recording, capturing every moment of what was about to become a turning point in Vanessa Sterling's life. What happened next would not only change the course of the evening, but would spark a national conversation about privilege, respect, and the true meaning of class. And it all began with a single tear that Jasmine couldn't quite hold back, glistening under the chandelier lights. But this was just the beginning. The real story was about to unfold, and no one, especially not Vanessa Sterling, was prepared for what would happen when that recording found its way into the world. Vanessa's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Oh, don't tell me you're going to cry now. This is exactly what I mean. Completely unprofessional. In my company, you wouldn't last a day. We have standards." The woman in red nodded in agreement, adding, "It's just like you always say, Vanessa. You can't buy class, and clearly some people will never understand what it means to be elite." Marcus Bennett's jaw tightened slightly, but his phone remained steady, documenting every word. He had been following Vanessa Sterling's career for months, watching as she built her empire on the backs of others. This moment was proving to be the perfect capsule of everything wrong with wealth without compassion. Jasmine stood straighter, gathering what dignity she could muster. "I'll send over another server," she said quietly, turning to leave. "No," Vanessa called after her. "You'll stand right here and listen to what I have to say. Someone needs to teach you about proper service, and clearly your training was inadequate." The restaurant had fallen completely silent now, the only sound the soft classical music playing overhead. Other servers hovered uncertainly at the edges of the room, unsure whether to intervene. That's when Marcus Bennett finally moved. He stood up slowly, his phone still recording, and walked toward Vanessa's table. His presence commanded attention. There was something about his calm demeanor that made people take notice. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet restaurant. "I believe I have something you might want to see, Ms. Sterling." Vanessa turned, irritation flashing across her face at the interruption. "And who might you be?" Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus Bennett, documentary filmmaker. I've been working on a series about power and privilege in America, and you've just given me the perfect ending." He held up his phone, and Vanessa's expression changed as she recognized herself on the screen, her own words playing back at her. The color drained from her face as she realized the implications. "You can't record me without my permission," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Uncertainty crept in where confidence had reigned moments before. "Actually, Ms. Sterling, in a public space like this I can. But more importantly, should we discuss what this footage shows? A billionaire entrepreneur who built her empire marketing beauty products to empower women, berating a young server who's working double shifts to pay for her mother's medical bills?" The women at Vanessa's table shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The one in red suddenly became very interested in her napkin. Marcus continued, his voice level but firm. "You've made your fortune selling the idea of beauty and confidence to women across America. Yet, here you are, deliberately trying to strip another woman of her dignity. I wonder what your customers would think about that." Jasmine stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Other diners had pulled out their phones, recording the confrontation. In the age of social media, moments like these could define or destroy a reputation built over decades. Vanessa Sterling, for the first time in recent memory, found herself speechless. The carefully constructed image she had built was crumbling before her eyes, captured in high definition for the world to see. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to Jasmine, his tones softening. "Ms. Thompson, I understand you're working here to help pay for your mother's medical treatment?" Jasmine nodded, surprised he knew this detail. "Well, I think it's time someone recognized your grace under pressure. I'd like to feature your story in my documentary. Not as a victim, but as an example of dignity in the face of disrespect. With your permission, of course. The tables had turned so completely that the atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted. Where moments ago there had been uncomfortable silence, now there was a palpable sense of justice being served. Vanessa Sterling's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Her empire had been built on image, on the perception of empowerment and class. Now, with one video, that image was at risk of shattering. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice attempting to regain its authority. "Surely we can discuss this privately. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement." "Money," Marcus interrupted, "isn't always the answer, Ms. Sterling. Sometimes the lesson is priceless." He turned to address the restaurant at large. "We live in a world where wealth often shields people from consequences, where money is mistaken for class, and where power is confused with worth. But true class? It's shown in how we treat others, especially those who serve us." The woman in red finally spoke up, her voice small. "Vanessa, maybe we should..." But Vanessa wasn't listening. She was watching as her own image played silently on Marcus's phone screen, seeing herself through others' eyes for the first time. The sight seemed to physically affect her. Her shoulders dropped, her carefully maintained posture wilting under the weight of reality. Marcus's voice softened, but his words carried no less impact. "Ms. Sterling, you've built an empire telling women they should feel beautiful and empowered. Perhaps it's time to consider that true empowerment comes not from putting others down, but from lifting them up." Jasmine, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. "All I wanted was to do my job well and earn enough to help my mother. I never wanted to be part of any statement or lesson." Her simple words seemed to cut through the tension, reminding everyone present of the human cost of casual cruelty. The evening at Le Jardin would soon end, but its impact was just beginning. Marcus's phone had captured more than just an incident. It had captured a moment of reckoning, a mirror held up to privilege and power. As Vanessa Sterling gathered her things to leave, her usual confident stride replaced by something more uncertain, she paused beside Jasmine. For a moment, it seemed she might speak, might offer some apology or explanation. Instead, she simply nodded, a gesture that acknowledged something had fundamentally changed. The video would go viral within hours, sparking discussions across social media about wealth, privilege, and the treatment of service workers. Vanessa Sterling's company would face backlash, forcing her to make public statements and reassess her company's values. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't captured on any camera. It was the quiet revolution that began in that restaurant, as diners watched power dynamics shift and recalibrate. It was the reminder that in an age where everyone has a camera, our true character is always on display. Jasmine Thompson would eventually become a symbol of grace under pressure, her story inspiring others to stand up against workplace bullying. Marcus Bennett's documentary would go on to win several awards, sparking a national conversation about wealth and responsibility. And Vanessa Sterling? She would learn the hardest lesson of all. That true class can't be bought, and real power lies not in how we treat those above us, but in how we treat those who serve us. The evening at Le Jardin changed more than just a few lives. It reminded everyone that in a world where every moment can be captured and shared, our actions matter more than ever. And sometimes, the most powerful lessons come when we least expect them, served alongside truffle fondue in Manhattan's finest restaurant. If this story moved you, take a moment to thank the service workers in your life. And remember, true class isn't about what you own or what you wear. It's about how you treat others when you think no one is watching, or, in this case, when someone is.